Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, June the 3rd, 2025. Today, or perhaps yesterday, if you're in the Americas, there is or was a first quarter moon. And I've already talked about this event, when the sun and the moon are square each other. And in this video, I want to talk some more about it and consider its possible impact. And I will be looking at a few people who might be impacted by this first quarter moon. For example, we've got Pierre Poilievre, the Canadian, not quite leader of the opposition because he lost his seat, but I think he's looking for a new seat, or I think he's actually found a new seat, but he has to wait for the election. So he hasn't gone away in spite of his election defeat. So I thought it would be a good idea to look at his chart. And happy birthday to Pierre Poilievre. I want to also look at Russell Brand's chart. So Russell Brand, the sort of YouTube influencer, celebrity, etc., and who has been in court recently, and he's pleaded not guilty to charges of rape and sexual assault, and so now might be a good time to look at his chart. And I think it's Russell Brand's birthday. I think that's tomorrow. On the 4th. So that's a chart I'll be looking at. And there are a few other people I want to briefly look at. Pete Hegseth, he's I think got a birthday coming up. I want to look at his chart, and also Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador. And now I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today, which is Tuesday, June the 3rd. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And so here's a chart, and the moon is solidly in Virgo, so it doesn't matter where you are, there is a Virgo moon, and it is a first quarter moon. Well, sort of yesterday was a first quarter moon, and today is as well. And I don't know, it does depend on where you are, but like yesterday, got moon in Virgo, sun in Gemini, and this does relate back to the previous new moon, which was on May the 27th, and which was at 6 degrees Gemini. And so, it is a time when we're thinking about what has changed and how we're getting it together and what we've accomplished so far. And it's a good opportunity to get moving on things at this stage in a lunar cycle. It's a time we've got the idea, sun in Gemini, but now moon in Virgo, we've actually got to put it into practice. Moon in Virgo in an earth sign. And the moon also makes a square to Mercury, and so that moon square Mercury can be irritated. That can how it can feel. Moon Mercury is something bothering us, and this may be reflected in how we communicate. We've got lots of things to say, but how are we going to say them? And some of the things we say might go down the wrong way. And so with moon square Mercury, possibly we have to watch our words. And talking about words and communication, there is a sesquiquadrate between Mercury and Pluto. You see, Mercury and Pluto, they are now 135 degrees apart. And there are different ways of looking at that sesquiquadrate. Pluto is about power and it's about control. And you could say that if you put Mercury and Pluto together with a sesquiquadrate, that might be about propaganda, trying to persuade and trying to use our sort of mental power to get our way. I won't say emotional power, because look at what's going on at the moment. There are no planets in water signs, unless you count true black moon Lilith or the North Node. And so it's not an especially emotional day. And instead, it's more about the way we use information. And so that might be about how Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto is working. We want to use what we know, perhaps even what little we know, to get our way. And so it's maybe about leveraging a few facts to prove a point. And so we can do that, not just prove a point, but to demonstrate our case. So we can do that, but we might be on the other end of that. Look at how other people argue. Look at how they support their arguments. They might sound convincing with Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto, but if you scratch the surface, you might realize that potentially there is nothing there. Now, I'm not saying nothing there as a statement about Pluto, and Pluto is a substantial influence. But as I said, people are leveraging what they know, even leveraging what little they know. Now that's a picture for set for New York. If we set that chart for Sydney, Australia, then Moon's still in Virgo. Moon's at 11 Virgo. That first quarter moon is particularly strong in Australia and New Zealand. You can see it's exact around sort of lunchtime. If you're in the Americas, you could say that first quarter moon was more of a feature of yesterday, but I think we can regard this first quarter moon just as the time that we are living, or rather the day, today, yesterday, not the times we're living, but where we are in a lunar cycle. But yeah, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, you may really feel that clash between Moon in Virgo, Sun in Gemini. Sun in Gemini, the ideas, there's a lightness to it, and then the Moon in Virgo is saying, well, hold on, what about the details? Are you going to be able to sort it out? So that's Sydney, Australia. But I don't think that there's going to be a huge amount of difference between the experience of those of you in Australasia and those of you in the Americas. And then there is the heliocentric chart. Now, yesterday I talked about the heliocentric chart, and I mentioned the fact that there was a grand trine. Grand trine, well, in Earth signs, I don't know whether one can really talk about Earth signs with a heliocentric chart, but there is a grand trine there, and Venus, Mars, and Uranus together. Now, that grand trine is not as close as it was yesterday, and so perhaps it's weakening, but it's still very much there. And as far as what it means, I think we might be already seeing one manifestation of this grand trine. Remember, it's Mars, Uranus. Mars is actually, to be honest, the grand trine may be breaking up because Venus is moving on, but that Mars-Uranus trine is really very close today. And one thing I considered talking about today in terms of the news is, of course, the Ukrainian attacks on these air bases in Russia. Well, I doubt it was Ukraine did it all by itself. I think it must have got a considerable amount of help from the UK, other places. The United States, does Trump actually know what's going on? I'm beginning to be rather disappointed by Trump. I think Trump, in some respects, is coming over as quite a weak leader, to be honest, particularly in terms of foreign policy. I mean, he has his bluster, but one wonders who's in control. I think he is turning into quite a disappointing president so far. And I do think he's quite a weak leader. Yeah, I think that's kind of surprising to many. Sorry, I'm risking a few down votes, or not down votes, dislikes. People are losing subscribers, but maybe there's a whole element of the United States that he's out of control of. We really want to continue with this war against Ukraine. So we don't know who was involved with this, but it was a dramatic attack. And additionally, I think that there has to be a response. I mean, surely there has to be a response. I'm not saying that because of astrology. Logically, something has to happen. Plus, we've had the trains being attacked. I mean, that was just killing civilians. I mean, that's kind of what one would expect from Ukraine. I mean, it is to a great extent a terrorist state, but Still, we have this grand trine involving Mars and Uranus, and that does create a lot of instability. And we know that there are supposed talks between Russia and Ukraine going on at the moment, or at least I'm making this video on Monday, but there has to be a response. And so that grand trine is still operational. And with that Uranus involvement, that's where we might start to see its impact. And additionally, the Earth is making a semi-square to Venus, and I think that Earth semi-square Venus is kind of activating the grand trine. It might not seem obvious, but the Earth has, because if you think about it, the Earth has made a minor aspect. I mean, a 24th harmonic conjunction to Mars, and now it's making an 8th harmonic conjunction to Venus, and it's separating from a 24th harmonic conjunction to Uranus. I know these are micro aspects. So I think that Earth square, semi-square Venus could potentially trigger things. So now Monday, Tuesday, first part of the week, while that grand trine is still operational, we could see a response, or we could see things changing. So, I mean, I think that we really do need to look at what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, and could be somewhere else, somewhere that I haven't thought about. And aside from the political situation, Mars trine Uranus is Mars trine Uranus is it is quite a dramatic aspect. It relates to violence, things happening unexpectedly, and in our own lives, well, it's not a time to be, doing anything safety critical unless we really know what we're doing. And in terms of relationships and how people get on, Mars trine Uranus could just stir things up. So maybe we have to be a bit careful about that. But I think with these heliocentric charts, they kind of are more about the overall atmosphere than individual lives. So now let me do my forecast for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, June the 3rd, 2025. Aries. Aries, it's another day when you want to do things properly. And so you have that chance, and you want things to be straightforward, and you want to know how things work. And I think Aries, you're going to have a good attention to detail, and in one sense that's welcome. But you don't want to have too much attention to detail. There is some possibility that you really can't see the wood for the trees. You try to do things properly. I know this isn't standard Aries fare. Aries likes to be, freer, have more opportunities for, taking the initiative. That's what you want. But you're not quite a typical Aries at the moment, and so you want to do things properly, but you just might miss out on something. You might decide that you actually want things to be simple, and in your attempts to make things simple, you just miss things out. You sort of miss complications out, or you see a confusing situation and you don't want to. You're not interested, and you just want to do it properly, and you pretend that something will go away, and maybe it won't go away. So Aries, do try to be flexible, and just because you don't understand something or something seems too messy, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't engage with it. On a sort of more positive note, I think at the moment, Aries, you're going to be, very effective as far as talking is concerned. I think that if you've got something to say, you will know how to say it, and your words will come out very well, and you'll perhaps know what to say and what not to say, and also you'll be able to talk up your own abilities if that's something you need to do. And so do think about what you're trying to do, and how you might want to influence other people, because in your own way you can be quite influential. But if you want to be influential, it's just important that you are broad-minded and you don't spend too much time focusing on one or two things. As I said, there is that danger. Now, I just looked at the heliocentric chart, and heliocentrically there is a trine between Mars and Uranus. So Mars, your ruler, is trine Uranus. Now, how that works out, well, it kind of depends. I mean, Mars trine Uranus may give you the opportunity to do something unexpected. You don't really want to do anything unexpected. I think many Arians just want a straightforward life, as I've kind of already suggested. But there may be a chance to do something that no one is expecting, and it could actually be very effective. And so, when that opportunity arises, try to fit into sort of natural Aries mode and take that initiative. Now, Mars trine Uranus could potentially have a negative manifestation, and it might just be about being accident prone, a bit clumsy, doing something and you think you've sorted it out and it doesn't work out. And it might be that if you are accident prone, or if something does happen that you weren't expecting, may not be because you are actually impulsive. It may be because there are things you just haven't bothered with. You bother with the things you want to bother with, and if something is a little bit ill-defined or complex, then you don't really want to think about it. But it's those things that are ill-defined and complex that could trip you up. So Aries, do look at everything, and if you don't want to explore something, that doesn't mean that you should, live in your comfort zone. Some things do have to be understood, and so that's something you need to do. And it might be a pain, but I think it could be well worth the effort. Taurus, you at the moment are feeling relatively good about yourself. I mean, you'd like to feel good about yourself, at least. You feel that there are things that you're good at. Feel that you want to do, and so if you can just be left alone to do them, that would be fine. And you can feel confident about it and feel that you are really doing the right thing. But having just said that you're feeling good about yourself, there could be moments of self-doubt, and you might be wondering whether you have really got what it takes. And I mean, it could just be a matter of over-analyzing something and just having doubts for the sake of it. So that is a possibility, and not seeing something through because you're worried about the consequences. So that is certainly possible. Additionally, Taurus, you just might find yourself going in places that you don't need to go to. You're looking to do something which is original, that is a fundamental demonstration of who you are. That's all well and good, but you might find that you get distracted and you're doing something that you don't necessarily understand, or you even might find that you are listening too hard to what other people are saying. And some of it may link with the fact we've got this grand trine today. I mean, well, the grand trine was exact yesterday, but Venus is still trine Venus, trine Mars, trine Uranus, heliocentrically, by the way. When I'm talking about this grand trine, I'm talking about a heliocentric grand trine. So, Venus is still trine Uranus, Venus is still trine Mars. And so, that could create some events, create things going on that you hadn't fully expected. And, additionally, Venus is making a semi-square to Earth heliocentrically. Let's just remind you what I'm talking about here. There's Venus, your ruler, in the heliocentric chart, and it's semi-square Uranus. It's trine Mars. Sorry, Venus is semi-square Earth. It's trine Mars. It's trine Uranus, and that semi-square Earth could be about you not feeling fully grounded. Even though the moon is in Virgo, the moon is in an earth sign, there may be a feeling, Taurus, that you're not quite there, you're not quite with it, and you may feel just dislocated. And we perhaps see further evidence of that in the fact that Venus is moving through. If we look at the geocentric chart, the fact that Venus is now at 2731 Aries. Venus is starting geocentrically. Venus is starting to leave Aries, and so you're not quite sure where you are, and you're not quite sure where you're going, and as a result of that, you could be vulnerable. That's one of the reasons you could be vulnerable to being distracted, because you're losing your commitment. Taurus is a very committed sign. You have usually clear ideas about what's right and where you want to go to, but that sense of commitment is weakening at the moment. It's temporary, and it will change. Once Venus moves into Taurus in a couple of days' time. But while Venus is in late Aries, you're just not entirely sure, and so what do you do? Well, what you could do is think about what you trust, the people you trust, the situations you trust, and things that have come up with the goods in the past. It's probably not a time for doing things which are completely new. Stick to what you've got, and perhaps what you've got needs to be just further developed, and you've maybe you've almost finished it, but not quite. And additionally, this may relate to other people. People who have worked well for you in the past are probably going to work well for you now, and they could actually, in certain situations, help sort of keep you on the straight and narrow. But Taurus, what does matter is that you're doing something that you actually feel good about. And again, that doesn't mean you have to do anything new. The old tricks are probably going to work best for the moment. Gemini, Mercury is making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto. This Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto is probably the main aspect of the day, and Mercury, as we know, is in a strong position. It's in Gemini, it's in its own sign, and so with this sesquiquadrate to Pluto, that may indicate that you can actually be very convincing. You can be persuasive. You can talk about what matters to you, and I think that people will listen. And it's possible that you can get by on very few facts. This is a Gemini feature. You know a little bit about something, and you may be able to get away with a relative lack of knowledge. And then you might feel quite pleased with yourself. But you do have to be careful. Just because you win an argument, it doesn't mean to say that you have won the war. At a later stage, you might be put to the test. So, do ask yourself, do you really know what you're talking about? have you really thought it through, or have you just convinced yourself that you are a genius? No, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you just don't be fooled by your own persuasiveness. And that's probably or possibly how Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto is going to work. But, the problem with Pluto aspects is that they can be very contrary. I mean, they can work in different ways for different people. So I've given you one scenario in which Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto could work. Now, for some Geminis, it might actually work in a completely opposite way. And I know I might sound as if I'm sort of hedging my bets here, but this is the nature of Pluto. And the opposite way would be, well, Mercury is your ruler, it's sesquiquadrate Pluto, and Pluto is the planet of the underworld, and Pluto might just shut you up. You just might not want to say anything. And that would be something happening out of fear, or you feel you're dealing with something larger than yourself, and so there's not really much you can do, not much you can say, so you better just keep quiet. And the right approach is somewhere in between. Ideally, Gemini, you're going to be aware of your own shortcomings, but you're also going to be sociable and upfront, and it is a day when you can get on with lots of people, lots of different people. You don't have to get on with them in an especially deep or meaningful way, but I think that your social skills, broadly speaking, are pretty good, and therefore it's a good idea to make an effort. You might not want to make an effort, though. So it is a contrary day. I think it's a day when, in general, you've got an impulse to do something and you've got a duty to do something else. When I say a duty, I mean a duty to yourself, not to other people. So, with a moon in Virgo making a conjunction to the South Node, some Geminis might feel they just don't want to do anything. They just can't be bothered. You're concerned about the risks, you're concerned about what might go wrong, and nothing happens. And that would be a shame. So it's important that you take into account what's happening at home, what's happening in your domestic life, but you can't let it dominate proceedings. And we do have this aspect between Moon and Mercury. The Moon is making a square to Mercury, so Mercury is you, and the Moon is challenging Mercury. So that challenge comes from potentially your home, your family, how they're interacting with you, how they're trying to maybe encourage you to slow things down. And that square, it could be a situation where the Moon is potentially undermining Mercury. Your immediate impulse emotionally is to do what is safe, to listen to your family or spend time at home. But that's your immediate impulse. But it's sort of tripping you up and sort of weakening you. So Gemini, just make sure that you are sociable and upfront, and you don't shy away from opportunity. And just remember the negative side about Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto. That Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto could shut you up. I mean, that's one way it can work. As I've already suggested, it could do the opposite. It could make you feel that you can be convincing and persuasive even if you don't know very much. And that might point to another constructive way in which Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto can work. It could be about you making the effort to really understand things, to really go deeply into something and just get to the bottom of it. You might already be halfway there. And so the factual basis for any confidence you might have could be explored further. And you may be able to fine-tune your arguments and fine-tune your facts, and that would probably be the best way of using that sesquiquadrate between Mercury and Pluto. Cancer. Cancer, Moon continues moving through Virgo, and it doesn't do a great deal in Virgo. It makes a square to Mercury. I mean, that square to Mercury could actually be quite irritating. It might be about how you're trying to talk to people, how you're trying to have conversations, or maybe there are organizations you're trying to talk to, communicate with, and it's just difficult. The words don't necessarily come out easily. I mean, it's true that you've got lots to say, but actually being able to get those words out could sometimes be a problem, and maybe you're conflicted. You're not quite sure what to say and what you should be saying. And how do you communicate when you're trying to keep some things to yourself? And so you might give the impression that you're actually holding something back. And, well, it's better to give the impression you're holding something back than to be talking too much about things that are precious to you that shouldn't be revealed at this stage. So, yeah, it's better to be cautious, I think. Now, the Moon in Virgo is making a conjunction to the South Node, and with this conjunction to the South Node, it's probably important not to take things at face value. Moon conjunct South Node might want everything to be simple and above board, to concentrate on what makes sense, what's easy to understand, and the challenge is to go deeper, and you might not want to go deeper. It might seem dangerous, it might seem unnecessary, but that moon is reminding you in a way, of how not to do things. So your first impulse today, Cancer, may not be actually the right impulse. And you should be prepared to ask questions and to explore things that you don't understand. But I don't think you're going to want to. And so that is a challenge. And of course, yesterday I was talking about the fact that it's a first quarter moon. Well, it's still the first quarter moon. And so, the first quarter moon, it is a challenging time for Cancerians, but it's a very positive time as well, because, it encourages you to think about, the best way of moving forward. You've got ideas. You've had ideas, since the new moon at the end of last month. Was it May the 27th? I think there was a new moon, and now you're in a position where you feel that action might soon be necessary, and so you have to look at what the basis for that action is. And with the moon conjunct the South Node, your first impulse just may not quite be the right impulse, because you just may be doing things on the basis of just insufficient knowledge, and you've taken what's easiest, what's most comprehensible, and what is most in keeping with your particular view of the world. And the first quarter moon is a challenge to go further, to understand things that you don't want to understand. Because once you've done that, once you have reached out to things which maybe appear to be beyond you, then you're going to be in a better position to really take the initiative and to really start to live out the promise of that new moon. So Cancer, if you are in a position where you feel you really want to get going on something, that is good. but just consider the possibility that, yeah, you don't know all the facts, and that there's still some work to be done, just to make sure that you understand, what things are really like out there in the world in which you are living. So it's a day that it's not. I don't think it's going to be a really exciting day, but it is a day when you can do some final preparations and readjustments, and there may be some assumptions you've made which you need to just reconsider. And it's not something you want to do, but I think that if you do have another look at something, and that's something relating to what you're trying to achieve, you'll notice some new stuff. And once you've noticed that new stuff and you've incorporated it into your plans, you'll be fine. Leo, you want things to go further, and you don't want to be restrained and kept back, and you're feeling that now is a time when the sky should be the limit. And so why is this? Well, you do have to look at the sun. I mean, the sun is your ruler, and the sun, of course, is in Gemini. But the sun has a rather interesting position. The sun is on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. So, Mercury was on a Jupiter-Uranus midpoint a few days ago, and that was an exciting place for Mercury to be. Now it's the sun's turn, and the sun is 15 degrees from Uranus, and the sun is 15 degrees from Jupiter, and Jupiter and Uranus are sort of making a semi-sextile to each other. And so I do think that this is actually a very important aspect for you, Leo. And when you think about Jupiter-Uranus, you think about freedom. You want to take things further. You're not quite sort of happy with the way things are. You know what's keeping you back, but you also know that whatever is keeping you back, you can break free from it. So if you're feeling frustrated, or if you're feeling that your freedom of action is being constrained, this is not a state of affairs you have to put up with, and it is a time when Leos can create big changes. And if you feel that you've been under a shadow recently, I'm not saying you have been under a shadow, but if you have felt you're under a shadow, that there was something bothering you, something was really getting to you, then now with the sun on a Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, you have a chance to find an escape. And so you can get away from something that has been bothering you. And it could be a psychological escape. You have perhaps just been too focused on one way of seeing things, and you haven't seen alternatives, you haven't seen other options. But now you see a chance to break free from an unsatisfactory situation. And it could be about a worry. So it might be that there's something that's been worrying you for a long time, and you have a chance to understand that this worry is really nothing. Now, I'm not asking you to be deluded. So if there is something genuine that you're worrying about, and it's not just about positive thinking. Some worries are just with us all the time, so we can't just make them magically go away. But if it's a kind of worry that is trivial, it could be something obsessive that maybe you've been obsessing about it, or we all of us have our obsessions. You may have an opportunity to just break free from it and just realize that things really are good, and that you have so many more options than you realized was possible. And Leo, if you want to be a rebel and to overturn things, then I think you can. And you might be able to get away with it. I think that if you are very clear about what you want, I think just people will listen and people will take you seriously. And because of that Sun, on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, that there is something about you that is actually quite charismatic. And so if you want to start your mini rebellion, now might be the time to do it. Now, on a more sort of down-to-earth basis level, the moon is making a square to the sun. Now, the moon was making a square to the sun yesterday. It's kind of making it today as well. Kind of depends on your time zone. That moon square sun was exact late yesterday. If you're in the Americas, it will be exact lunchtime today. If you're in Australia or New Zealand. So it kind of depends. But there's just this square relationship to the sun. And, this relates back to the new moon. So we had a new moon on May the 27th, just over around a week ago. And so that was a new moon for you. That was things you were trying, hopefully, things you were trying to start. It was a new phase. And now you can see a challenge. Now that challenge might actually be material, could even be financial. Moon in Virgo, square Sun in Gemini. Sun in Gemini represents you, everything you're trying to do, all your hopes, fears, wishes, whatever you're trying to achieve. And then the moon is presenting you with a challenge. And that challenge might be financial. It might be that you feel that, there are lots of things you like to do, but actually, have you got the money to do it? And that could be a question that some Leos are feeling. Now, if you're feeling that challenge, it's not a showstopper, but it perhaps is asking you to develop the right relationship with money, not in a long-term sense, not in some broad psychological development way, but as far as something you're trying to work towards. You do need the right relationship to money, and you need to make sure that you have the right attitude. Now, it could be that you think that something is going to cost a lot of money and you can't do something unless you have the money, and you're just coming up with excuses. And perhaps you can get hold of something, much, cheaply, perhaps. It needn't cost an absolute fortune. For example, I don't know what you're trying to do. For example, with a YouTube channel, you might think, if you try to set up a YouTube channel, you might think that you need to spend, thousands of dollars on a camera, when in fact you've got a webcam sitting here. I mean, it's that kind of thing that you might actually be using money as an excuse to stop you doing something, or using a lack of some material object. You need to get this in order to do that, and if you don't have it, that just brings everything to a grinding halt. But that would be so unnecessary, because it is a time, Leo, when you can, to a great extent, do what you want. You can be free, and you have to pay some attention to money for sure, but you mustn't let money be an obsession with this first quarter moon, because money is it's there for a purpose, and it shouldn't be a major distraction. And overall, this really shouldn't take away from the fact that today can be actually really, really fortunate for you, where you actually see what you can do. The promise of something which had been unfulfilled in the past can now become real, and you can actually see what you can achieve. Virgo, I think I talked about the first quarter moon yesterday, and I'm going to talk about the first quarter moon again. It matters. The moon is in Virgo. The sun is in Gemini, and they are in square to each other. Okay, that square between the sun and the moon might have been last night. If you were in the Americas, it might be lunchtime today if you're in Australia. But Sun in Gemini, Moon in Virgo, they have that square relationship. And I actually regard this square as being pretty positive. It encourages you to, you know, make the most of what you've got, and it also gives you a chance perhaps to get over recent disappointment. So if you feel that, you know, something hasn't been working out, that there's been loads of potential, but it just hasn't happened, then, you know, the moon square the sun, you know, does give you an opportunity to give things, you know, another go. And the moon is not just square the sun; it's square Mercury, and, you know, it is a challenge, but I think it's a fortunate challenge. So, you know, what you have to do with this square is really to focus on yourself and to think about what you can do, but, you know, don't feel that you are alone, because, you know, you could say that actually we have got a T-square, because, you know, the moon is making a conjunction to the south node, it's making an opposition to the north node, and the moon is making a square to the sun, and it's making a square to Mercury. So you may be given real hints now about how to get something off the ground. And, you know, in the past, things might not have entirely worked out, but now you're having another chance to look at things. And maybe the key is that North Node in Pisces. So, you know, North Node in Pisces represents the other. It's something you are maybe shying away from. It might be the way forward, but it just seems too complicated. And it just could be that if you felt that some of your ambitions have been thwarted, that there is an opportunity coming from elsewhere. It might be you need help from another person, or you need to reach out to a person, or it could be a group, an entity, an organization, something out there that can give you help, maybe advice as well. And you don't want to do it, because the problem is, or potential problem is here, is that with the moon conjunct the south node, there's a temptation to be overly self-sufficient. You might think that self-sufficiency is a virtue, independence is a virtue. If you're seeking help from elsewhere, then, you know, somehow you're compromising yourself. And the challenge here is perhaps to realize that, you know, you can't do everything on your own, and that people who are successful, people who get things together, they do make the most of outside resources, and that includes human resources. So you don't feel that it's all down to you. And, you know, in general, I think that this moon square sun and moon square Mercury could just be very enlightening if you give yourself that opportunity to really look back on the past, see where things might have gone wrong, and now perhaps be able to correct the problem. And I mean, by the way, I don't want to suggest there is a problem, but you just might feel there's a problem. And it could be, of course, Virgo, that you're actually just naturally able to make the most of this first quarter moon, that it just feels natural. You're feeling that things are really coming together. You know, whatever you were thinking about at the end of May with that new moon, it's now really starting to work for you. So that is certainly a possibility. And, you know, while all this is going on, Mercury is making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto. And I think it's worth being positive about this Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto. You know, Mercury is your ruler. It's in Gemini. It's strongly placed. And with that sesquiquadrate to Pluto, that may be about your power, and your power to get yourself together, and your power to organize. You know, organize is a word that is often used when describing Virgo. Okay, I understand that it is perhaps overused. Virgo's, all about detail, organization, getting things right. But this Pluto can really help you. And it just may be that your natural ability to organize and structure is really, moving into top gear, and you can create things around you and create changes to your routine, other people's routine, to just the way you do things. It might be about timing. It might be about when you get up, when you go to bed, when you meet people. Just creating a change of schedule, it could make a big difference. And Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto could really help you out. And it's important with Mercury sesquiquadrate that with Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto that it's you who is in control. A more negative way of looking at Mercury sesquiquadrate Pluto would be to say, well, that's other people messing with you. They're changing their plans, and you have to just fit in with what other people are doing. No, that's not what it's about. If other people are changing plans, and then you need to be strong. You need to say no. You need to do things your way, but not in a completely selfish way. You've got to understand where other people are coming from, and maybe there's room for compromise. But what you don't want today is change being dumped upon you. Change, if there is going to be change, changing schedules, for example, then you have to be involved in it. You don't want to lose power, and you shouldn't lose power. And I think if you handle things the right way today, I think actually you will have a lot of power, and you may actually realize, what needs to be done to fulfill some of your shorter term ambitions. Libra, you're feeling somewhat wary. I'm not saying that today's going to be great. I mean, you can't have a great day every day. I mean, that simply is not possible. And okay, you've got the moon moving through Virgo, and from a Libran perspective, moon moving through Virgo, isn't great. All things being equal, and you may feel that you can't really express yourself as you would like, and that you have to hold things back. And it may also strike you that just some things are out of control. You don't really know what they're doing. You don't know where they're going. You don't know how to manage them, and so that could be an issue with moon moving through Virgo. And so what you have to do is you have to be quite disciplined, and you have to make sure you understand things. You understand the way things are going, and how everything is sorted out. And at the same time, you don't want to be too rigid. If you want, you can sort things out, but also in such a way where you show some sensitivity. You've always got to allow a degree of give, and things can change. And so don't expect too much today. And also, there's a possibility that over the course of the day you start to feel negative. You just feel that something's not going to work, and it's going to be difficult to shake that feeling off, that there's no point. And at the same time, you might find yourself distracted, getting involved in things which maybe you don't really want to be involved with, and there's a temptation there, but it's not working out for you. And so you need some discipline here. And I mean, I really don't want to be negative, but there are reasons to think that today might not be one of Libra's better days. And so what kind of approach should you have? Well, if you are feeling negative, and you feel that something is not going to work out, then you need to understand that this is just a passing phase. It's absolutely not going to last very long. That's a point that has to be made. Secondly, it's very important that you're not distracted, and there could be distractions, even temptations and suggestions that you do things in a different way, suggests that you try out new stuff, and that's probably not a good idea. You want to be in control, and if you're not in control, if things are appearing sort of chaotic, and then you're doing something wrong. And so you always need to sort of return to what you know and trust. And this may also be a crisis of action. It is a new moon. Sorry, not a new moon. It's a first quarter moon, and so you had a new moon at the end of May, and I think for many Librans that new moon would have been quite positive, but now with this first quarter moon, you're having your doubts. Where is this all going? And you may be thinking that it's going nowhere, and the challenge here is to take control and not feel that everything's going to go your way immediately, but it can go your way, in the end. And perhaps matters are further complicated when we look at the heliocentric chart. And heliocentrically, we have a semi-square between the Earth and Venus. It's a 45-degree aspect, and of course Venus is your ruler. Earth is the planet on which you're standing, and so that Earth semi-square Venus is going to be disorientating. The world in which you're operating just may not feel entirely familiar, and so you have to just stop, stand back, allow things to readjust. And the one reason for this might be is that Venus is just getting ready to change signs. Venus is now in the late degrees of Aries. It's often said that planets in the very late degrees, often don't work well. I'm not saying I'm entirely convinced by that, but that might be how you feel as Venus moves through the last 2-3 degrees of Aries, that you really you don't understand what's going on, and at least you don't understand what's going on enough, and that's fine. And you don't have to necessarily do anything, but don't discount other people. Venus is still making a trine to Mars. Venus is making a trine to Mars heliocentric. So in fact, Venus is making a trine to Mars geocentrically. It's making a trine to Mars heliocentrically, and so perhaps what you need is another person, someone you trust, someone who's been there for you in the past. You need to talk to them, perhaps spend some time with them, and it could be that the right relationship could actually make today a lot better than it actually appears to be. I'm sorry to be negative, but I'm not trying to be overly negative. But tomorrow is another day. Tomorrow moon will be into Libra. Tomorrow the moon will move into Libra, your sign, and I think that tomorrow things will be better. Scorpio, you do have quite a lot to say, and you can speak with with great conviction, and it's really a very good day for showing off your knowledge. And so if there's something you've been keeping to yourself, then maybe things need to change. Show people what you can do, and tell everyone about your latest project. Of course, I understand that many Scorpios are quite secretive, so maybe there are some things you do want to keep secret, and you have to keep secret. But if you have the opportunity, if you feel it's right, telling people what you're doing, I think they're going to be interested. And also you're going to sound impressive. And if you are a Scorpio who has any, artistic abilities, then I think your ideas and your creativity and the fruits of your labor are going to be of exceptional quality. And so really, make the most of all of that. And as far as other people are concerned, it's good to talk about what you're doing, but you don't want to talk about it too much. You don't want to worry too much about what other people think. In fact, you shouldn't really be worrying about what other people are thinking at all. This is a time when you should be focusing on what you can do and on what you can do well. And so while it's a good idea to tell people what you're doing, it's not a time to be looking for criticism, constructive criticism, even for advice. I think that if you start to adjust your approach on the basis of what people are telling you, you'd actually be watering yourself down. Other people may have their uses, but you're the one who knows what's going on. It's not them. And so if you're given any criticism or advice today, I would take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, that's not to say that it might be useful advice, but it may just be nothing very important, and it might be a situation where other people are just projecting their own views of the world onto you, and they're trying to get you to fit in with their ideas, and that's not something you want, and that's certainly not something you need. But still, you can be sociable, and when you are sociable, when you're talking to people, you are maybe aware of the first quarter moon. The first quarter. This moon. We had a new moon at the end of May. I think it was on May the 27th, and that new moon was, I would have said, quite a personal new moon. It was quite sort of intense, encouraging you to think about who you are and what you're supposed to be doing. And then with the moon square the sun, it could have been yesterday if you're in the Americas, or today, certainly if you're in Australia. Lunchtime today is when lunchtime today, Tuesday, is when the sun and the moon are square. Around lunchtime, you see the challenge, and the challenge is other people and other people's response to you. And the challenge may be to hold firm to what you believe, and listen to what people say, but don't be wrong-footed by it, because that would be a shame. And additionally, Scorpio, you are someone who can make things happen. In the heliocentric chart, okay, not the geocentric chart, but in the heliocentric chart, Mars is making an exact trine to Uranus. Just to remind you, here's the heliocentric chart. There is Mars at 27 Virgo. There's Uranus at 27:30 Taurus. So that Mars-Uranus trine, and also Venus is making a trine. Remember, we've still got this grand heliocentric grand trine going on today, which I think actually could really help you. And it does allow you to do things differently and to make a really quite dramatic statement of your individuality if you get the chance. And so be an individual. That's the most important thing. Now, you could look at Mars trine Uranus from a more negative perspective, and you could say that Mars-Uranus can be connected with accidents and mishaps. And I suppose that's possible. It is possible if you're careless, but it needn't be. And it may actually be that if you try to be a conformist, if you do what you are told, this shouldn't happen, by the way, but if you find yourself doing that, and if you find yourself angry about having to conform to other people's norms, other people's ideas, then you are making yourself more accident prone potentially because you're angry, or there's some inner unconscious anger and frustration, and that could manifest as accidents, mistakes, or something like that. So the more overt and obvious you are in your militant individuality, then the easier it's going to be. And so what you have to do is you have to take that Mars-Uranus trine and you have to own it and take control of it, take conscious control of it. And so you can decide how you're going to use that heliocentric Mars trine Uranus, and you can use it to be an individual and to really make it clear who you are and who you are not. And this will be appreciated, and it may actually save you from having some kind of accident or mishap. So it's all about the symbolism and you taking control of the symbolism. And as far as relationships are concerned, well, Venus is still trine Mars, heliocentrically and geocentrically. And so I think that if you are authentic and if you are true to yourself, I think that people are going to appreciate this in the end. They might complain, but I think in the end they'll appreciate it. And this should allow you to get on well with the people who are really important to you. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, you do feel that now is a time when you should be doing stuff like yesterday, but it may be more urgent than yesterday. You feel that you want to be out there doing things, making an impression, and that's certainly something you can do. But making an impression for the sake of making an impression isn't necessarily a good thing to be doing. You've got to have a reason, and you've got to have some grounding there. So you have to think about how you are getting attention, and what the best approach actually is. And if you can try to be subtle, that would be good. Try to think about what your real priorities are. I think that then you can come over in a better way. And also, don't try too hard to please other people. I'm thinking especially of authority figures, people who may be above you in the hierarchy, whether it's in your family or if you're at work. Don't try too hard, because your efforts, for some strange reason, might not be appreciated, or they might just annoy you. And additionally, you have to, with the moon making a square to Mercury, you really have to find the right way of dealing with other people. I mean, other people are difficult to avoid, but their influence may not always be especially helpful. And, they might encourage you to do things that you don't want to do. And strangely, Sagittarius, there's something rather conforming about you today. There's an urge to conform, but it seems to be easiest to conform, easiest to do what you're told, and I don't think that's the right approach. You have to go back to basics and ask yourself who you fundamentally are, and that should be your starting point, where everything else should move from that. And additionally, if you look around you, this world in which you are functioning, may not seem to be especially pleasant, and that might be a good reason not to conform. You have a particular view of this world, and it just doesn't feel good right now, and you can see what's wrong. You can see the way it's all starting to decline and starting to just collapse in on itself. And that view is precious. I mean, it's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, because you've got eyes to see, and if you've got eyes to see, then you need to develop your own approach, an approach that is quite protecting, and if you protecting of yourself and those that are important to you. And if you just conform to outside pressure, you might be neglecting important things, and that's not going to be right, and that's not going to be helpful. So Sagittarius, it's a day when you need to really think about yourself and your particular approach and your particular position, and it's certainly not a day to be doing what you're told, because you have your own view, and I think that view is something that you do need to respect. Capricorn, you are starting to see how everything is panning out. You can see things develop, and you can actually get quite a wide view on it all, and that does give you a position of knowledge and also responsibility, because you can maybe see things that other people can't see, and you might starting to think about broad ideas, broad principles. This is how it should be, and that might not necessarily be the right approach. I think you need to look at things on a lower level. It's great having big ideas and big principles, and worrying about whether or not these principles are being followed, perhaps judging people on a moral basis. It's nice to do that sometimes, but right now you need to look. You do need to look at things at a lower, more basic level, and so I think one would call that more of a bottom-up rather than a top-down approach. So look at the facts, consider how the facts are panning out, how they're fitting together. But probably, Capricorn, it's not a good time to be reaching conclusions. If you do try to reach conclusions, it's absolutely possible that you reach the wrong conclusions. And additionally, if you spend too much time trying to align things to sort of broad concepts, you might mess yourself up, because what you should be trying to do at the moment, in that typically Capricorn way, is to create structure. It's a great time for creating structure at the moment, and it's been this way since the new moon on May the 27th. But there is this challenge. It's you're doing something, and then suddenly you're told to do something else, and you're telling yourself to do something else. You're having doubts about the very work you're doing, and I just don't think that those doubts are going to be very helpful. Although one doubt can easily lead to another doubt, and some of your thoughts at the moment, Capricorn, they may be quite dark and pessimistic, and this might also be shown by what you say, and your words could be harsh, and you may be indicating that you have a particularly negative view of things. And also just plain language, your language may be upsetting, and so perhaps you have to be careful what you say. So Capricorn, it's potentially a complicated day, and I would have said that the best approach is just to stick to what feels comfortable, and not, and indeed also, what you've been doing in the past. You're probably fine. Your existing activities, absolutely fine. You carry on with them, and it will work out fine. But if you change your mind because of what you're told, or you change your mind because of what you decide you believe in, then today might not work out. But it's up to you. Aquarius. It could be quite a serious day. There are things that you are maybe concerned about, and as far as you're concerned, they need a lot of thought, and there's a possibility that you complicate things, maybe even over-complicate things. Why? Just because you feel like it, because once you start going into something, why stop? But do not make things more complicated than they actually have to be, and try to keep it simple. Try to use Occam's razor. Occam's razor. How does that go? If you're trying to work out why something happened, do try to focus on the simplest explanation. Example as Occam's razor. If you see a light flashing across the sky, don't just automatically assume that it's a UFO. Consider a more reasonable possibility first, like it's just an aeroplane or a weather balloon or something like that. So whatever you're doing, don't overcomplicate it. You don't fall foul of conspiracy theories. I'm sure you won't. Just try to find the simple explanation, and the simple explanation will just make things a lot easier. And you don't want to worry and obsess about nothing. And there is a possibility, Aquarius, that some of your thoughts are rather unusual and even quite alarming. I think you actually have quite a suspicious nature at the moment. I shouldn't use the word nature, because nature suggests something that is permanent. It's not like you are suspicious all the time. But at the moment, you have a suspicious view of the world, and you're not really in the mood for taking things at face value. Now, that can be a benefit. There are a lot of things around us that shouldn't be taken at face value. There are a lot of lies around us. Even the media is lying to us. Maybe especially the media is lying to us. So, don't take things at face value, but at the same time, don't exaggerate, and don't create a complication where no complication need exist. And so, keep it simple. And this may apply to money. So if you're involved with money and other people's money, and you're having discussions about money, you should always insist that things are made simple, and that you actually look at the headline numbers. Sometimes the money is the money, and you could have all sorts of complicated arrangements, but it doesn't take away from the actual simplicity of a matter. So if you are grappling with financial matters, simplicity, openness, and transparency are what you should be striving for. And so that is the problem of today. But I don't want to create a problem actually where none exists. And on another level, we have a first quarter moon. Okay, that first quarter moon may have been yesterday if you're in the Americas. It may be the exact sun square moon. It may be today. That depends on where you are. But that first quarter moon, is a challenge. So we had a new moon at the end of May, and I'm hoping that new moon should have reminded you of what you can do, about what is possible. And hopefully over the last week or more since that new moon, you've started to get a clearer idea about what you can do, what you can achieve, and also what you enjoy. And the first quarter moon is maybe the first challenge. You've actually got to turn theory into practice, and the challenge might be to do something which releases your creative energy, and ask yourself, what is the fear that's been holding you back? I think there might be something holding you back, something you're worried about. You feel that if you were to just be yourself, then bad things might happen. You might get criticized or something worse, and you have to get over that fear, get over that hurdle. What is getting in the way of your creative self-expression? Now, maybe that nothing is getting in the way of your creative self-expression. And as I often say when I'm being negative, I don't want to create a problem where no problem exists. But if you feel that you're not reaching your full potential, then now is the time with this first quarter moon to actually create the change, to move things on. And it could just be a moment of liberation that may actually come through another person. You have your own views, and sometimes you can be very single-minded, and sometimes you just need another person's opinion, and another person's opinion could make all the difference. And someone who has an optimistic approach, who sees things in the best possible light, maybe just the person you need. And so if you're spending a lot of time with another person, even if you're not, even if someone just turns up with an optimistic attitude, an optimistic approach, that may be all that's needed. And certainly if other people are enthusiastic and optimistic, as they might well be at the moment, then you should regard that as a blessing, and you can become part of another person's positive approach. And so it's probably not a good idea to spend a day alone, because if you spend a day alone, then you might kind of go into a spiral and start to obsess about things. But if you've got someone around you or people around you who have a more sort of positive approach and who can be encouraging and enthusiastic, that's just perhaps what you need to get things going. And it's not just about today, it's about negotiating this first quarter moon, because you need to get things moving now if you want to really make the most of the lunar cycle in which you're in, so that that by the full moon in a week's time, hopefully things will start to be manifesting, and in a constructive and happy way. Pisces, don't worry too much about what other people are doing. Might be a certain temptation there, with the moon making a conjunction to the south node in Virgo. And the south node is the line of least resistance. What is easiest for you? And the south node has been moving through Virgo for some time. Virgo is, of course, your opposite sign. And so with the moon making a conjunction to the south node, and the moon making a square to Mercury, and actually a square to the sun, there is that temptation to listen too hard to other people, do things their way. And you might, but I'm not sure if that would be. I'm not sure if that would be desirable. And you'd need to think about the North Node. The North Node is in Pisces, of course. I mean, it's been in Pisces for some time, as you perhaps know. But the North Node in Pisces is about you, and it's making sure that you do what you feel is right, and that you don't spend ages worrying about other people, and you don't want to upset anyone, you don't want to get any criticism. No, I think the moon conjunct the south node, well, it's certainly highlighting a line of least resistance. You are tempted to do things other people's way. You're tempted to seek approval before doing anything, but I'm not convinced that is the right approach. And instead you should be thinking about what you are, who you are, and what you can do. And it's important not to be overly negative. I mean, some Pisceans might be negative. They might think that things are not working, or that you're running into a moment of, or times of delay and frustration, and it is actually possible that you do become quite pessimistic, and I don't think that need be the case. And perhaps, Pisces, you just have to realize that you're going through this because Jupiter is starting to move into the last degree of Gemini. So with the moon moving, Jupiter in the last degree of Gemini, you're concerned about whether you've actually accomplished anything, and there might be some real doubts. And the fact that we've got this first quarter moon today may be actually accelerating these doubts, and you kind of should feel secure. You should feel that you've actually accomplished quite a lot over the year, but it just may be that you're overly interested in what other people are doing and what other people are saying, and that might actually help accelerate the doubts. And so you don't have to listen to other people, and you don't have to be negative, but you just might be. And so if you do find yourself being negative, don't take it too seriously, and don't think that worst case scenarios are going to happen, because they're not. And additionally, try not to be in a situation where you're reliant on any one person. And I think that's important. So if you're regarding one person as being the solution, or there's only one person who's important, or one person whose advice you should listen to, that's probably not a healthy situation. And so it's better that you see the world as being composed of lots of different people with lots of different opinions, and there's none of these opinions in themselves should be taken too seriously. And so I'm not convinced that today's going to be great, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. And if you do find yourself having negative or even catastrophic thoughts, don't worry about it. And I should say that, remember, this is only astrology. This is 12 sign astrology. I mean, don't take it too seriously. It's just one view, and I'm not looking at your whole chart, but I'm just kind of warning you that you don't want to get into a situation where you're overly reliant on other people and their negativity, because that could trip you up, and I don't think that is very necessary. In fact, it's not necessary at all. So, having looked at the astrology of the 12 signs, I want to consider things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first and only hexagram I got was splitting apart. Now, splitting apart is not a great hexagram, and it doesn't move. No moving lines. And so today might feel as if you are separating from something, that something is over. Something is just going nowhere, and it might even be collapsing in on itself. But there are no moving lines here, so it's it does mean that it's not some active, ongoing event where one disaster leads to another disaster. It's just a broad situation where things are splitting apart. You recognize that perhaps one thing you're involved in is not working, hasn't been working. You've seen how maybe inferior elements have work their way through the system, and you can see the damage that they have caused. And it may not be about your life, it may be about other people's lives, or it could just be about the world in which you're living, and that's just your experience of it. And your immediate response might be, to think that you've got to do something about it, that you've got to resolve the issue, but no moving lines. There's nothing actually that has to be done. And if we look at the nuclear hexagram, the nuclear hexagram is the hexagram in the middle. If we knock off the top and the bottom lines, we see in the middle we've got a load of broken lines. So the nuclear hexagram of splitting apart is hexagram number 2, which is the receptive. It's pure yin. And so it's the negative approach. It's doing nothing. So if you see that things are falling apart, and if you see that things are in a state of decay, don't do anything about it. Not short term. Don't feel that you have to react. Instead, just accept the situation for the moment. Remember, this I Ching reading is just for today. It's not about the rest of the year, for example. It is very short term. And so, to begin with, do nothing. Just take on board what's happening. Observe. And it's a situation where if you do try to be creative, to try to make something happen, you see that something is wrong, you feel you want to do something, it's just not going to work, because this is a receptive, and the receptive, is about the female principle. I think the Wilhelm translation talks about the receptive as the perseverance of the mare, as in the stallion, the female horse. So the feminine principle perseveres, by really doing nothing, or perhaps responding to the situation. But even then, responding, I don't think there's anything that actually has to be done. And it's about just taking it on board and just accepting that something is not working and that it's falling in on itself. And maybe that's a good thing, because once something has fallen in on itself, the powers of evil and disintegration have reached their peak. And if you don't interfere with the evil, if you don't participate in whatever it's doing, you can't be hurt by it. I mean, if you want to play Star Wars, whatever, when Alec Guinness gets killed by the lightsaber, or not killed by the lightsaber, you do nothing, and you can't be killed, you can't be hurt. And so it's that approach. As soon as you start to try to be creative and you try to interact with the situation, then you can be hurt. But if you are not responding, then whatever this disintegration is, it can't touch you. And so that is the right approach. And finally, let's look at this first quarter moon. And so we do have first quarter moon. I make it that this first quarter moon, where's it gone? First quarter moon, I make it that it took place at 4:41 a.m. London time, or it will take place at 4:41 a.m. London time, depends what time you're watching this video. And the sun is at 12 degrees 50 Gemini, and the moon is at 12 degrees 50 Virgo. And so, first quarter moons, I do think that they're important, and they are the call for first action, because this is the waxing moon. The moon is getting bigger, and something new started with the new moon on May the 27th. That new moon at, I think, 6 degrees something Gemini, and so now this full moon has the new moon has developed. We got the first quarter, and so it may be about action. And this particular first quarter moon. It's Sun in Gemini, Moon in Virgo. So Sun in Gemini, new moon, is about having ideas, having positive ideas, perhaps being a bit chaotic about these ideas in a Gemini sense. So perhaps just over a week ago we had these ideas, we had these thoughts, and then the first quarter comes along, Moon in Virgo. Moon and Sun, so Gemini and Virgo, both ruled by Mercury, but it's passive Mercury. It's Mercury as the organizing principle. And so we have to take what we started at the end of May and start to structure it and work out what is possible. So that may be, in a general sense, what this first quarter moon is about. Now, to get some sort of added information about the first quarter moon, it's often a good idea to look at it on the 90-degree dial to see what midpoints it hits. So here's the 90-degree dial, and the 90-degree dial does show conjunction squares and oppositions as all being conjunctions. And let's just change the settings. This is, I think that's the 30-degree dial. We want a 90-degree dial. There we go. So there's the new moon. Sorry, well, it's not. There's the first quarter moon. It's not a new moon, but it's shown as a conjunction. And so we're looking at what midpoints it's on. Now, this first quarter moon is on the Mars-Neptune and the Jupiter-Uranus midpoints. And so Mars-Neptune, Jupiter-Uranus, if you put that together, you might say that there is something a bit deluded about this first quarter moon. Mars-Neptune is about action based perhaps on a fantasy, or taking action which is not always appropriate. We're fooled. But then Jupiter-Uranus is about freedom, about breaking free from something. And so it's good to be able to break free with this first quarter moon. We realize we want to do something, and so that is a positive nature of this full moon. But we have to be careful how we go about it. And so I think this new moon on a Jupiter-Uranus midpoint is something that we can benefit from. So if we have felt that it's over the last week that we've been restricted, we've had a great burden on our shoulders, we've been worrying about things, the first quarter moon may allow us to break free. But we have to be careful how we break free because of that Mars-Neptune, because it's also on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. So we might break free, but on the basis of false information, on the basis of a false assumption. So if we are going to do anything dramatic, we do need to think about it a bit. And we should then remember that this first quarter moon is Sun in Gemini square Moon in Virgo. So Moon in Virgo, we need to be constructive about that. Moon in Virgo is asking us to think about it and to plan it. So in our escape, whatever we're trying to escape from, we need to plan our escape. Just escape for the sake of escape without thinking it through, well, it might not work. And yeah, we might be deluding ourselves. But this first quarter moon needn't be a delusion, but it just could be if we're not careful. So that's the first quarter moon. I've set this for London, but if we look at some other places that might be impacted by this full moon, well, let's set it for Moscow. Given there's just been this massive attack on Moscow's air bases, and so this full moon, it might have an impact on Russia and what Russia does and how Russia sees itself. This moon is The moon in Virgo is on Russia's I See, and square the sun is square the midheaven. And so, I mean, I'm pretty general, vague here, but I think that from a governmental perspective, you could see that the North Node is, the midheaven is at 13 Pisces, and with the but with the first quarter moon hitting the midheaven, something has to be decided here in Moscow. I mean, it's not a super dramatic chart for Moscow, but I think that there is a tension here. They had their invasion of Ukraine, or the special military operation as they call it, and that the first quarter moon may be about having to adjust their approach, or realize that, okay, it started, okay, maybe 3 years ago, but now they've got to perhaps do something else needs to be done. So that's Moscow. We should always look at Washington DC. Even if nothing is going on in Washington DC, we should still get an idea about it. And yeah, there is something going on here. So this first quarter moon, Pluto on the ascendant, you've got 0 degrees Aquarius rising, you've got 22 degrees Taurus on the IC, so you've got Mars, so you've got Uranus on the IC. So I think it's quite dramatic for the United States. That Uranus on the IC, perhaps assumptions have to be questioned, and this may put some pressure on the government, but Pluto on the IC, Uranus. But when you've got an angular Pluto and an angular Uranus, it's quite possible that the Trump regime feels it has to do something. It always has to do something. It's always trying to create surprises. That's what they're trying to do. And look at Mars. Mars is in the 7th house. So this could be the crisis of action for Trump, feeling he has to do something. I mean, I know that he does some things which always catch people unawares, like Liberation Day, suddenly announcing tariffs. But it may actually be with this first quarter moon that something has to shift. That there has to be yet another dramatic announcement or some dramatic initiative. And another place to look at would be Gaza. So this first quarter moon does impact Gaza. Let me just show you, or Israel in general. So let me do an astro map to show you Israel on this. So let's just. So here is all the places where Jupiter is rising. Okay, Gaza is actually here, so it's not actually exactly on Gaza, but it's close enough to Israel, and not just Israel, it's the Middle East. And I think that there is the moon on the midheaven, and Jupiter is crossing here, so there is a theoretical point. My geography is not very good. That's Jordan. Is that Iraq? I think that's Iraq. But so that intersection. But this first quarter moon, because Jupiter's rising and moon is on the midheaven around northern Iraq, Jordan, Israel, it's likely to affect the Middle East, and things have moved to a certain point. But now the question is, what now? Of course, that all sounds very vague, because the trouble about the Middle East, as with the Ukraine, is that things are always going on. And I wanted to finish by looking at a few famous people who might be impacted by this first quarter moon. And I'll start with the US Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. So Pete Hegseth, he's got a birthday coming up. He's got his birthday coming up on the end of the week. And Pete Hegseth has his Mars at 12 degrees Virgo. He also has his ascendant at 11 degrees Sagittarius and his descendant obviously at 11 degrees Gemini. So Pete Hegseth in his horoscope has got Mars square the ascendant. And so, that almost has a Mars in the 10th house feel to it. Or it depends what kind of house system you're using. If you're using equal houses, he would have Mars on the 10th house cusp. But so that full moon exactly hits his Mars ascendant square. So that might affect Pete Hegseth. Now, probably he's not going to be forced to resign for any reason because, Trump doesn't want to damage the regime. But it may say something about what he's doing, what America is involved with, because he's a representative of America's defenses, its defense department. And so full moon might be quite aggravating. This first quarter moon could be very aggravating for him. And it may highlight his Mars square ascendant. So there is something quite aggressive about that Mars square ascendant. Mars in Virgo square ascendant getting annoyed about particular details. And so this first quarter moon, if I was advising Pete Hegseth, I would advise him to just not take anything too seriously and not to get caught up in the minutiae of things, not to get angry about something not working out. But it could say something about what he has to deal with. Some new challenge comes along that the Defense Department has to worry about. And another person who I haven't really been following him from a Dutch perspective is Geert Wilders. I don't know anything about Dutch politics, but I know that he's a right-wing politician, and his party did pretty well in the last election, but not well enough. And Geert Wilders has his sun at 13 at 13 Virgo. Again, don't have a time of birth for him. And so his sun is opposition Chiron, because he's got his Chiron at 12 degrees Pisces. And so this first quarter moon, it's on his sun. And so this may be about a political decision. Again, I have no idea what's going on in Holland, in the Netherlands. So it may be in terms of what his plans are politically. This first quarter moon reminds him that there's something he has to do. Maybe he's been allowing something to slip. Maybe there's been an opportunity for him which started with that new moon at the end of May. And now, a week later, that first quarter moon is, he's got moon on his sun square his sun, and the question is, what is he going to do now? So if you're in the Netherlands, maybe over the next week you should be, looking at Geert Wilders and, seeing, what he's up to. Of course, if you're interested in politics, which you might not be. And other political leaders, the president of Mexico. I don't have her time of birth, but she is a Cancerian, early Cancerian. She's got her Mercury at 12 degrees Gemini, so she's going to have the sun on her Mercury, the moon square her Mercury. I mean, she's got a Mercury-Pluto square, so you could say that this first quarter moon sort of activates her Mercury-Pluto square, and she's got a Jupiter. Well, she's got a Mercury-Jupiter square as well. So the first quarter moon is activating this, and it's her Mercury. So what is she thinking about? What does she have to think about as president of Mexico? I mean, I'm sure there are lots of things that president of Mexico has to think about. So there may be some new issues she has to deal with, and the question is, how does she deal with it? How does she respond to the situation? I can't really say more because, again, I don't have a time of birth, and I don't really know a great deal about what is happening in Mexico. And then going a bit further south, we go to El Salvador, and Nayib Bukele, he's the president of El Salvador. I see that El Salvador recently bought some more Bitcoin. I think they're trying to build up build up their Bitcoin. The IMF doesn't like what they're doing, but their Bitcoin investment seems to be working out quite well at the moment. And in spite of recent falls, I think that it seems to be a bold, independent-minded thing for El Salvador to do. So here is Nayib Bukele's chart, and he has an ascendant at 13 degrees 41 Gemini. So that ascendant at 1341 Gemini, you can see that with this first quarter moon, the sun is on his ascendant, the moon is on his part of fortune, and he does have true black moon Lilith on his lurking on his 7th house cusp. So this full moon is likely to have an impact on him, and you could say that this is about what he has to do. What does he have to do next? Again, I'm not really following El Salvador politics, but he's the darling of the conservative right at the moment, and he's got Trump on his side, so that certainly helps. And so there may be action required. Also, don't forget he's been taking in deportees from the United States. A lot of them have been sent to El Salvador. So that this first quarter moon may be encouraging him to, consider what he's doing, and perhaps he's thinking about his next initiative. He's got sort of plans, ideas, which perhaps started with the new moon, and now he's got this first quarter, which is encouraging him to take the next step. Though that true black moon Lilith might be dangerous, because this first quarter moon is hitting his true black moon Lilith exactly on a descendant, and so that might be his enemies both at home and abroad that he needs to watch out for. And then there is Russell Brand. So Russell Brand has just appeared in court, and he pleaded not guilty to rape and sexual assault. And Russell Brand's birthday is tomorrow, so that's on Wednesday. And Russell Brand is very much a Gemini, and there's his sun in Gemini. So this full moon is is hitting his sun. It's also hitting his true black moon Lilith. He does have you've got the moon opposition his true black moon Lilith, and in fact, if you look at Russell Brand's chart, he's got Sun Neptune opposition with true black moon Lilith on the T, and so this full moon this first quarter moon could be a bit complicated for him. I mean, he's just appeared in court, but I don't think he's actually going to his next court date. If I've got this right, maybe I've got this wrong. I was talking about it being June 2026, so he's going to have to wait a year before he actually comes to trial. I find that incredible. He has to wait a year, but it is potentially a difficult time for him. But first quarter moons perhaps should be seen as new beginnings, and so if I were to advise Russell Brand, I would try to be optimistic about this full moon and say that this is a chance to move in a new direction, especially as it's taking place. His first quarter moon is taking place close to his birthday, and so there may be opportunities there. But the moon is in his 7th house. Towards the end of his 7th house, sort of moving towards his 8th house. So, his enemies potentially are coming out of the woodwork, and so that's something he perhaps needs to watch out for. And finally, there is Pierre Poilievre, and it is his birthday today. So happy birthday to Pierre Poilievre. He is I think he was the Canadian leader of the opposition. I think he's kind of still leader of the opposition, at least de facto, and he will be again when he gets his seat back. It's always dangerous when someone has given up their seat, because he lost his seat in the election. Someone has given up their seat so that he can stand in a by-election. to be back, so he can get back in the House of Commons, so he can then become leader of the opposition again. And so he's a Gemini with his moon in Virgo, and so again, I don't have a time of birth for him, but his moon is definitely in Virgo. So he's got first quarter moon on his solar return, and it mirrors what he's got in his own chart. So for him, I would probably see this first quarter moon as being reasonably positive, because it is a first quarter moon. You've had the crisis, losing his seat, losing the election, and then what do you do now? And so the first quarter moon, it's his solar return. It is the challenge of what he does, and look at his north node. He's got his north node in Virgo, so it's like starting again. He's got moon in Virgo. He's probably quite good at sorting out the details, sorting out the party organization. So I would probably have seen this first quarter moon, as being quite positive. Here is his solar return. Again, this solar return is of limited value, simply because I don't have a time of birth for him, and so that, just a reminder that the first quarter moon does contain that sun square moon. And as far as anything, is it a particularly spectacular solar return? No, not really, except for the fact that it does contain this first quarter moon. And I think the first quarter moon, it's about him starting again, and this is the first sort of crisis point where he has to get re-elected in the by-election. Of course, electorates, I don't know, certainly in the UK, electorates often hate it when MPs, members of Parliament, stand down so that someone else can take their place. And they very often act in a way that is not expected. I think there was a case. What was his name? Was it Patrick Gordon Walker? That was a long time ago. He was some politician who wanted to get back into Parliament, and it took him certainly the first by-election didn't work out for him, because the electorate don't like unnecessary elections. So we shouldn't necessarily assume that Pierre Poilievre will immediately get back into Parliament, that he'll win this by-election, but he probably will. But so that's his challenge. Sorry not to say anything particularly amazing or useful about that, but it is his birthday, so I do wish him a happy birthday. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.